June 4th, 1942. 0620 hours, 180 miles northwest of Midway Atoll. Ensign Albert Burt Ernest fights to keep the TBF-1 Avenger level as a 20mm cannon shell punches through the cockpit canopy 3 inches from his head. Glass explodes inward. The slipstream screams through the hole like a banshee. Behind him, radioman Harry Ferrier is firing the .50 caliber dorsal turret in short, desperate bursts. Below and behind, belly gunner J. Manning's .30 caliber Browning chatters continuously, and everywhere, there are zeros. The Avenger is massive compared to the nimble Japanese fighters swarming around it. 15 tons fully loaded, 54 feet of wingspan, a Wright R2600 Cyclone engine that produces 1,700 horsepower and still barely keeps the torpedo-laden beast in the air. Ernest can feel the aircraft wallowing, sluggish, every control input delayed by the enormous weight of the Mark 13 torpedo slung beneath the fuselage. 6 more on our tail! Ferrier's voice cracks over the intercom. He's 19 years old. This is his first combat mission. Hell, this is the first combat mission for all 6 TBF Avengers launched from Midway this morning. The aircraft so new, it still smells of factory paint and hydraulic fluid. A zero flashes past Ernest's left wing, so close he can see the pilot's face. Young, focused, confident. The Japanese fighter's 7.7mm machine guns rake the Avenger's port side, and Ernest feels the impacts shudder through the airframe like hammer blows on sheet metal. Something in the wing tears loose with a metallic shriek, but the Avenger keeps flying. Ernest pushes the stick forward, diving towards the wavetops where the Zero's speed advantage might be reduced. The altimeter unwinds, 1,000 feet, 800, 500. The ocean rushes up, gray-green and cold, whitecaps stretching to the horizon. He levels off at 200 feet, so low that spray from the wavetops spatters the windscreen. Behind him, the dogfight has become a massacre. He catches glimpses in his mirror. TBF Avengers burning, spinning into the sea, exploding in orange fireballs that leave nothing but oil slicks. The 6 aircraft of Torpedo Squadron 8, detachment, are being slaughtered. 5 are already gone. Only Ernest's aircraft remains, and it's shedding pieces with every pass the Zeros make. "Manning's hit!" Ferrier screams. "He's not moving!" Ernest can't look back, can't do anything except fly. The torpedo release mechanism is jammed. Some piece of battle damage has locked it closed. He's carrying a 2,000-pound bomb he can't drop, flying an aircraft that's turning into a sieve, pursued by fighters that should have killed him 5 minutes ago. Should have. But the Avenger, this massive, ungainly torpedo bomber that looks like it was assembled from parts of 3 different aircraft, refuses to die. A Zero pulls up alongside, matching Ernest's speed, and the Japanese pilot looks over. For a brief moment, their eyes meet across 100 feet of Pacific air. The Zero pilot's expression shows something Ernest can't quite identify. Not fear, not respect, something closer to confusion, because the TBF Avenger is still flying, still fighting, still refusing to fall into the ocean despite being hit dozens, maybe hundreds of times. The Zero pilot shakes his head slightly, as if unable to believe what he's seeing, then peels away to find easier prey. Ernest flies on, alone, bleeding hydraulic fluid and fuel, his belly gunner dead, his radio man wounded, his aircraft shot to pieces. Midway Atoll appears on the horizon like a promise of salvation. He lines up on the runway, no landing gear, the hydraulics are gone, and bellies the Avenger in with a grinding shriek of tortured metal. The aircraft slides 400 feet, throwing sparks, shedding parts, and finally stops at the runway's edge. Ernest shuts down the engine and sits in the sudden silence, hands shaking on the control yoke. When the crash crew pulls him from the cockpit, they count the damage. Over 60 bullet and cannon holes. The elevator control cables are nearly severed. One landing gear leg is sheared completely off. The rudder is Swiss cheese. The hydraulic system is destroyed. And the aircraft flew home anyway. "What the hell is this thing made of?" one of the mechanics asks, staring at the wreckage. Ernest looks at the Avenger, the ironworks beast that just survived what should have been unsurvivable, and realizes something that will take the Japanese months to understand. Grumman doesn't build aircraft. They build flying tanks. June 4th, 1942. 14:30 hours. IJN carrier Hiryu, 200 miles northwest of Midway. Lieutenant Commander Tomonaga Joichi stands on the flight deck and watches the maintenance crews inspect his returning fighters. The pilots are animated, gesturing wildly as they describe the morning's engagement with American torpedo bombers. "Big aircraft," one pilot is saying. "Very slow, very heavy. We shot them all down." "All of them?" Tomonaga asks. "Hi, 6 torpedo bombers, all destroyed. Easiest kills of the war. But something bothers Tomonaga. He's an experienced strike leader, 103 combat missions, veteran of Pearl Harbor and the Indian Ocean raids, and he's learned that when something seems too easy, it usually means you're missing something important. "Describe the aircraft," he says. The pilot thinks. "Single engine, mid-wing, very thick fuselage, fat like a pregnant woman. 3 crew, we think, turret on top. They carried torpedoes but never released them. Most died before reaching attack position." Tomonaga frowns. This doesn't sound like the Douglas TBD Devastators the Americans have been using. Those are older, lighter, already obsolete. This sounds like something new. He makes a mental note to include it in his after-action report, but the detail feels trivial compared to the day's larger drama. Because even as he stands here, the American carrier fleet is somewhere over the horizon, and the fate of the Imperial Japanese Navy hangs in the balance. What Tomonaga doesn't know, what none of them know yet, is that those 6 easy kills were the first combat deployment of an aircraft that will haunt Japanese pilots for the next 3 years. An aircraft that refuses to burn, refuses to break, refuses to die no matter how much punishment it absorbs. The Americans call it the Avenger. By war's end, Japanese pilots will call it something else entirely. The Unkillable. August 7th, 1942. 15:45 hours. USS Saratoga, 100 miles east of Guadalcanal. Lieutenant Harold Swede Larson stands in the ready room and stares at the TBF Avenger like it personally offended him. "You want me to fly that?" he says to Lieutenant Commander Charles Jett, the squadron's commanding officer. "That's a Grumman TBF-1 Avenger," Jett replies calmly. "Newest torpedo bomber in the fleet. You should be honored." "It looks like a pregnant whale." Jett doesn't disagree. The Avenger is ungainly. There's no polite way around it. The fuselage is thick and bulbous to accommodate the bomb bay and torpedo. The wings are stubby. The canopy sits high on the fuselage like an afterthought. Compared to the sleek lines of a fighter, the TBF looks like something designed by a committee that couldn't agree on anything except bigger. "It's got armor plating around the crew stations," Jett continues. "Self-sealing fuel tanks. The right Cyclone engine can take a beating. And Grumman builds tough. The Navy didn't nickname them Ironworks for nothing." Larson walks around the aircraft, running his hand along the riveted aluminum skin. Up close, the Avenger is even more imposing. The engine cowling alone is massive. 14 cylinders arranged in 2 rows, big enough to swallow a man. The wings are thick, with a distinctive fold mechanism that lets them collapse upward for carrier storage. And everywhere there's weight. Armor, structure, redundant systems, the mechanical complexity of an aircraft designed to absorb punishment and keep flying. "How's she handle?" Larson asks. Like a truck. Heavy on the controls, especially with the torpedo loaded. Cruises at 145 knots, maybe 160 if you push her. Top speed around 275 if you're desperate and diving. Jet pats the fuselage. But she'll bring you home. I've seen the combat reports from Midway. The one that made it back had more holes than metal. One made it back, out of 6. Because they flew into a fighter screen without escort. You won't be doing that. We've got doctrine now, tactics, and you'll have wildcats covering you. Larson climbs the wing and peers into the cockpit. The instrument panel is complex, more gauges and switches than the old TBD Devastator he trained in. Hydraulic pressure, oil temperature, manifold pressure, propeller pitch, turret control, bomb bay doors. It's less a cockpit and more a mechanical symphony that requires conducting. Behind the pilot's position is the radio man/gunner station with the 50 caliber turret, a powered unit that can traverse 360 degrees. Further back, accessible through a narrow tunnel, is the belly gunner position with a .30 caliber Browning that fires through a ventral hatch. 3 men, 1 aircraft, all wrapped in Grumman's signature over-engineering. When do I fly her? Larson asks. Tomorrow morning. First strike on Guadalcanal. We're supporting the Marine landings. Jet's expression turns serious. The Japanese have 4 airfields in the Solomons. They're going to contest this operation with everything they have. Expect heavy opposition. Larson nods. He's flown 32 combat missions in TBDS, watched too many friends burn in obsolete aircraft that couldn't take a hit. If this ungainly beast can keep him alive long enough to deliver ordnance and make it home, he'll fly anything, even a pregnant whale. August 8th, 1942, 07:15 hours, 15,000 feet above Tulagi Harbor. The zeros come out of the sun like falling knives. Larson sees them 2 seconds before the first burst of 20-millimeter cannon fire shreds the air beside his left wing. He throws the Avenger into a hard right turn, not graceful, not fast, but committed, and feels the aircraft respond with ponderous determination. The G-forces press him into his seat as the horizon tilts crazily. "Contact! Contact!" Aviation radio man second class Robert Chen shouts from the turret. The 50 caliber opens up with a hammering roar that Larson can feel through the airframe. 3 on R6 coming in steep. Larson knows the numbers. A Mitsubishi A6M0, 2,750 pounds empty, 331 miles per hour maximum speed, turns on a dime. A TBF-1 Avenger with a full torpedo load, 15,905 pounds, 275 miles per hour maximum, turns like a loaded freight car. In a dogfight, the Zero should cut them to pieces in 30 seconds. Should. The first Zero makes its pass, guns blazing. Larson feels the impacts, a drumbeat of hits marching up the starboard wing. Metal tears. Something important rattles loose. But the wing doesn't fold, doesn't catch fire. The self-sealing fuel tanks do their job, automatically closing around the bullet holes. Chen's turret swivels, tracking the Zero as it pulls up and away. The 50 caliber chatters again, long, disciplined bursts. The Zero jinks right, evading, but not before taking hits across its lightweight fuselage. "I hit him!" Chen yells. "I think I hit him!" The second Zero attacks from below, where belly gunner aviation ordnanceman third class James Nolan is waiting. The 30 caliber Browning opens fire, and the Zero breaks off early, unwilling to press the attack into defensive fire. Larson keeps the Avenger turning, bleeding altitude, heading for the cloud layer at 8,000 feet. Every instinct says, run, get low, get fast, get away. But the Avenger isn't built for running. It's built for absorbing. The third Zero comes in from the port quarter, a perfect deflection shot. 7.7mm machine guns and 20mm cannons light up simultaneously. The canopy shatters. Something punches through Larsen's left shoulder, a fragment of something, hot and sharp, and he gasps in pain. The control stick goes heavy as hydraulic fluid pressure drops, but the Avenger keeps flying. Chen's turret tracks the Zero, leading it perfectly. The .50 caliber fires a 3-second burst, 30 rounds, and the Zero's engine explodes in a gout of black smoke. The Japanese fighter rolls inverted and spirals down, trailing fire. "Kill!" Chen screams. "That's a kill!" Larsen barely hears him. He's fighting the controls, trying to keep the damaged aircraft level. His shoulder is bleeding, soaking his flight suit. The instrument panel is a mess of shattered glass and sparking wires. The hydraulics are gone. He'll have to crank the landing gear down manually if he makes it back to the carrier. But the right cyclone engine is still running, still producing power. The wings, punctured, torn, leaking fuel, are still attached. The control surfaces, damaged, sluggish, still respond. Every system has redundancy. Every critical component is protected by armor or positioned behind something expendable. Grumman built this aircraft to take punishment, and it's doing exactly that. Larsen breaks through the cloud layer and levels off at 5,000 feet. The Zeros don't follow, maybe out of ammunition, maybe unwilling to chase damaged prey into bad weather. He checks his position. 70 miles to Saratoga. 70 miles with a shot-up aircraft, wounded shoulder, and battle damage he can't even fully assess. "Chen, Nolan, status?" "I'm good, sir," Chen replies immediately. "Turret still operational." "Plenty of ammo." "Nolan's hit," Chen adds, his voice tight. "Leg wound. He's conscious but bleeding." Larsen does the math. 1 pilot wounded, 1 gunner wounded, aircraft shot to hell, engine running rough, hydraulics failed, and still 70 miles from safety. In a TBD Devastator, they'd already be swimming. In the Avenger, they're still flying. October 26th, 1942. 0935 hours. USS Enterprise, Santa Cruz Islands. Lieutenant Commander John "Jojo" Powers stands on the flight deck and counts the returning Avengers. 8 launched, 7 coming back. The missing aircraft, Lieutenant Morrison's bird, went down with all hands after taking a direct hit from a 5-inch shell during the attack on the Japanese carrier force. But the 7 survivors look like they flew through a metal shredder. The first Avenger traps aboard with its port elevator half shot away, flapping uselessly in the slipstream. The second is trailing smoke from the engine cowling, oil streaming back across the canopy. The third has no tail wheel. It sparks along the deck in a shower of orange friction fire before catching the number 3 wire and jolting to a stop. Powers watches them all come home. Watches the plane handlers swarm each aircraft, counting holes, assessing damage, marking the worst hits with yellow chalk. And everywhere, there's battle damage that should have been fatal. Lieutenant Charles Dowden's Avenger has a hole in the port wing big enough to crawl through. The 20mm shell passed completely through the wing, missing the main spar by 3 inches and the fuel tank by 5. Dowden doesn't even know it happened until the deck crew shows him. Ensign Robert Reese's aircraft took a 7.7mm round through the engine that punched through 3 cylinder heads and lodged in the crankcase. The right Cyclone kept running on 11 cylinders, producing 80% power, enough to limp home at 130 knots. And then there's Lieutenant Moose Miller's bird. Powers walks over to where Miller is sitting on the wing, helmet off, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. The Avenger behind him looks like it was used for gunnery practice. The fuselage is perforated with over 100 bullet holes. The canopy is gone, blown completely away by a 20mm hit. The rudder is hanging by cables. One main landing gear strut is bent at an angle that makes Powers wince just looking at it. "How?" Powers asks simply. Miller takes a drag and exhales slowly. I don't know, sir. They hit us maybe 200 times. Maybe more. I felt rounds going through the cockpit. Through the actual cockpit, inches from my head. Chen in the turret took shrapnel in his arm and kept firing. We lost hydraulics, electrics, half the control surfaces. He looks back at the aircraft. And she just kept flying. Like she was angry at them for trying to kill her. Powers knows the feeling. He's seen it across the fleet now. TBF Avengers coming home with damage that would have destroyed any other aircraft. The old TBD Devastators were fragile, their fuel tanks unprotected, their structures light. You hit a Devastator in the right place and it folded like paper. The Avenger doesn't fold. It has 3 separate fuel systems, all self-sealing. It has armor plating around the crew stations, not decorative, not token, but real protection that stops bullets. It has redundant control systems, hydraulic and manual backup for almost everything. And it has Grumman's design philosophy. Build it tough, build it redundant, accept the weight penalty because dead crews don't care about performance margins. The Japanese are starting to figure it out, Powers says. Intelligence intercepts show their pilots complaining. They call it the heavy torpedo bomber in their reports. They're having trouble killing them. Miller stubs out his cigarette. How many total losses this deployment? 14 aircraft, but only 2 to fighter damage. The rest were flak, operational accidents, or direct hits from capital ship guns. Powers pulls out his notebook. We've lost 42 TBF pilots and crew since Midway. The old TBD squadrons lost that many in single engagements. The numbers tell the story. The Avenger isn't invincible. Nothing is. But it's survivable in a way carrier aviation has never experienced before. Crews are coming home from missions that would have been death sentences 6 months ago. Aircraft are being repaired and flying again after damage that would have written off an entire airframe. And word is spreading. Not just through the American fleet, but across the Pacific to the Japanese side. The sluggish, ungainly torpedo bomber that Zero pilots mocked at Midway is becoming something else. A problem they can't solve. Form. November 3rd, 1942. 16:20 hours. Rabaul Airfield, New Britain. Flight Petty Officer Saburo Sakai stands in the debriefing room and tries to explain what he just experienced. The Grumman torpedo bomber, he says carefully. It is not like the Douglas type. The intelligence officer, a young lieutenant who's never flown combat, makes notes. Explain the differences. Sakai thinks about how to articulate this. He's one of Japan's leading aces, with 56 confirmed kills. He's fought against every American aircraft type in the Pacific. He knows the strengths and weaknesses of the F-4F Wildcat, the P-39 era Cobra, the P-40 Warhawk. He can predict how they'll maneuver, where their blind spots are, how much punishment they can absorb before falling. But the TBF Avenger doesn't fit any known pattern. The Douglas torpedo bomber was easy to kill, Sakai begins. Light structure. No armor. The fuel tanks caught fire easily. A short burst from 7.7 millimeter guns was usually sufficient. And the Grumman? Today I attacked one from optimal position. High rear quarter, diving attack, convergence set for 200 meters. I fired a full burst. Perhaps 150 rounds of 7.7 millimeter and 30 rounds of 20 millimeter cannon. I saw my tracers strike the fuselage, the wings, the engine cowling. The result? Sakai pauses. It continued flying. The rear gunner returned fire and nearly hit me. I was forced to break off. When I came around for a second pass, another Zero, Nakamura's aircraft, was attacking from the opposite side. He also scored multiple hits. And then, the Grumman descended into clouds. We lost visual contact. Sakai's voice carries frustration. 2 Zeros, perhaps 300 rounds total. Multiple cannon hits, and it escaped. The intelligence officer looks skeptical. Perhaps your aim was not accurate? Sakai's eyes narrow dangerously. He's a veteran of hundreds of combat engagements, a marksman who can hit a target at 400 meters in a high-deflection shot. The suggestion that he missed is insulting. My aim was precise, he says coldly. The aircraft absorbed the damage and continued operating. I watched 20-millimeter shells explode against its structure. I saw pieces fly off, and it kept flying. The lieutenant makes more notes. Sakai can see the doubt in his expression. The assumption that combat stress is making him exaggerate, that no aircraft can be that tough. But Sakai knows what he saw, and he's hearing similar reports from other pilots. The American torpedo bombers are becoming harder to kill, not through superior maneuverability. They're still slow and heavy. Not through better tactics. They still fly predictable attack patterns, but through sheer structural resilience that defies logic. How many Grumman torpedo bombers have you personally destroyed? The lieutenant asks. Sakai thinks. None. You have 56 confirmed kills. You have engaged these aircraft multiple times, but 0 kills. Correct. The admission tastes bitter. I have damaged several. I have seen them smoking, trailing fuel, flying with obvious control problems. But I have not seen one fall from the sky due to my fire. The lieutenant sets down his pen. Then perhaps different tactics are required. Perhaps. But Sakai knows the real answer is simpler and more troubling. The Americans have built an aircraft that matches Japanese philosophy of lightness and maneuverability with Western philosophy of protection and redundancy. And the Western approach is winning. Because a damaged Zero must return to base or ditch. A damaged Avenger keeps fighting. And in a war of attrition, that difference is everything. June 19th, 1943. 12:47 hours. Philippine Sea, 100 miles west of Saipan. Lieutenant, junior grade. George Platz feels the Avenger shudder as a 7.7 millimeter round punches through the firewall, and he knows, with absolute certainty, that today is the day his luck runs out. The Marianas turkey shoot is supposed to be a slaughter in America's favor. Over 400 Japanese carrier aircraft launched against Task Force 58 this morning, and the F-6F Hellcats are ripping them apart like paper targets. But Platz's strike group, 15 TBF Avengers hunting the Japanese carrier fleet, has stumbled into a hornet's nest of Zeros that somehow slipped through the fighter screen. There are 9 of them. Maybe 10. Platz stopped counting after the first 3 passes. More on our 6th, Aviation Radioman First Class Thomas Burke screams from the turret. The .50 caliber hammers continuously, barrel already glowing red hot. They just keep coming! Platz hauls the stick left, throwing the Avenger into the tightest turn the overloaded aircraft can manage. The G-forces press him into his seat. 3, maybe 4 Gs, and the airframe groans in protest. A Mark 13. Torpedo hangs in the bomb bay, 2,000 pounds of dead weight that turns the aircraft into a flying anchor. A Zero flashes past the canopy, so close that Platz can see the pilot's leather flight helmet, the rising sun insignia bright red on the fuselage. The Zero's 20-millimeter cannons flash, and the Avenger's starboard wing explodes in a shower of aluminum fragments. The aircraft lurches violently to the right. Platz fights the controls, right foot jammed hard on the left rudder pedal, stick pulled back, and left. The Avenger responds sluggishly, trailing pieces of wing skin that flutter away in the slipstream like aluminum confetti. Wing structure compromised, Platz shouts. I've got major control issues. Belly gunner's not responding, Burke yells back. Baker, you hear me? Baker, Aviation Ordnanceman, 3rd class. William Baker doesn't answer, won't answer. Platz saw the 20-millimeter shell that punched through the belly position 3 minutes ago, saw the flash, heard the sharp crack of the explosion over the engine noise. Baker is gone. 2 crew left, 1 aircraft disintegrating around them, and still 5 miles from the release point where they might get a shot at the Japanese carriers. Another Zero makes its run, this time from dead ahead. Platz sees the wing guns flash and braces for impact. Rounds stitch across the engine, cowling with the sound of hammers on sheet metal. Bang, 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 and something in the right cyclone explodes. Oil pressure drops. Cylinder head temperature spikes. The engine doesn't quit. 14 cylinders, 2 banks, 1,900 cubic inches of displacement. The Zero's rounds destroyed maybe 2 cylinders, damaged a third. The other 11 keep firing, pistons pumping, crankshaft spinning, producing maybe 70% of rated power. Not enough to climb, barely enough to maintain altitude, but enough to keep flying. Platz watches the Zero pull up and away, probably assuming the kill is confirmed. The Japanese pilot has no way of knowing that Grumman over-engineered everything, that the R2600 Cyclone engine was designed with the assumption that battle damage would destroy multiple cylinders, that the redundancy is built into every mechanical system. "We're still flying," Burke says, voice filled with disbelief. "How are we still flying?" "Because she's a Grumman," Platz replies through clenched teeth. "And Grumman builds tanks, not airplanes." He checks the damage. Right wing structural failure. Maybe 30% of the wing surface gone. Engine operating at reduced capacity. Oil pressure at 50%, running rough. Hydraulics compromised. Gear and flaps will have to be manually cranked. Belly gunner dead. Fuel leaking from punctured tank. Self-sealing foam is working, but not perfectly. Any rational assessment says they should ditch now, jettison the torpedo, put down in the water, hope for pickup by a destroyer. But Platz can see the Japanese fleet ahead, gray shapes on the horizon, carriers maneuvering, escorts throwing up flak that bursts in black puffs across the sky. And he's carrying a Mark 13 torpedo that cost $10,000 and represents months of manufacturing labor by workers back in the States who believe in him. "We're making our run," Platz announces. "Sir, we're shot to hell." "We're making our run." Platz's voice cuts through the intercom like a blade. "I didn't fly this far to drop fish food in the ocean." "Burke, you keep those Zeros off our tail for 90 more seconds. That's all I need." "Yes, sir." Burke's voice is steady now. Committed. 90 seconds. Platz pushes the damaged nose down, trading altitude for speed. The Avenger accelerates. 140 knots, 150, 160. The airframe vibrates like it's going to shake apart. The damaged wing flexes alarmingly. The engine sounds like a mechanical disaster in progress. But the torpedo-aiming sight is steady in front of Platz's eyes, and the Japanese carrier growing in his windscreen is exactly where it needs to be. 2 Zeros make simultaneous runs, 1 from each side. Burke's turret swivels left, then right, splitting fire between them. Neither presses the attack all the way in. They've learned that the 50 caliber tail gun has longer range than their 7.7 millimeter weapons. That trading fire with a desperate gunner in a dying aircraft is a good way to die yourself. Platz ignores them. His entire world has narrowed to the sight picture, the target, the geometry of the attack. Range, 1,200 yards. Speed, 160 knots. Altitude, 250 feet. Angle, 30 degrees off the carrier's bow. Perfect. His thumb finds the torpedo release. Pickle's hot, pickle's hot, pickle. The Mark 13 drops away with a heavy clunk that makes the entire aircraft leap upward, suddenly 2,000 pounds lighter. The torpedo hits the water cleanly, its motor ignites, and a white wake streaks toward the carrier at 33 knots. Platz doesn't wait to see if it hits. He banks hard left, still losing altitude, heading for the relative safety of the cloud layer 10 miles away. Behind him, Burke's .50 caliber keeps firing, keeping the Zeros at bay. "We're clear," Burke shouts. "They're breaking off." Platz looks back. The Japanese carrier is turning hard, trying to evade, but the Mark 13 is tracking true, and at 800 yards there's no escape. The torpedo strikes midships with a waterspout explosion that sends debris 200 feet into the air. One hit. One carrier damaged, maybe sinking. One impossible attack run completed in an aircraft that had no business still flying. "Enterprise, this is Striker 7, Platz radios. Voice hoarse. "Torpedo away, one hit confirmed. Returning to base, aircraft heavily damaged, one crew killed in action. Request priority landing and medical." "Roger, Striker 7. You're cleared for immediate recovery. Nice shooting, nice shooting." As if it was easy. As if they hadn't just survived what should have been unsurvivable. Platz looks at the Avenger's instrument panel. Half the gauges shattered, warning lights glowing, oil pressure still dropping. He looks at the wing, torn, perforated structural ribs exposed. He looks at the engine, running rough, smoking, but running. And he understands why Japanese pilots are starting to fear this aircraft. Not because it's fast or maneuverable, because it refuses to die. Because it absorbs punishment that would destroy 3 Zeros and keeps flying, keeps fighting, keeps completing its mission. The Iron Works built an Iron Bird. And it's winning the war one impossible sortie at a time. October 24th, 1944. 15:35 hours. USS St. Lo, Leyte Gulf, Philippines. Lieutenant Commander Robert Fowler watches the kamikaze Zero diving and realizes with cold clarity that his Avenger is about to become a shield. He's on the St. Lo's flight deck, sitting in his TBF-1C with the engine running, waiting for takeoff clearance to join the afternoon CAP. Beside him, 3 other Avengers are similarly positioned, fueled, armed, crews strapped in. And directly above, coming out of the sun at terminal velocity, is a Zero with no intention of pulling out. "Kamikaze!" The cry goes up across the deck. Men scatter. Gun crews traverse their 40mm Bofors, tracking the diving fighter. Tracers arc upward, a stream of desperate fire that misses by 50 feet. Fowler has maybe 3 seconds to decide. He could unbuckle, bail out, run, save himself. The smart play, the logical play. Instead, he reaches down and flips the master armament switch to safe. If the kamikaze hits his aircraft and the ordnance cooks off, it'll take half the flight deck with it. Better to die than to help the bastard destroy the ship. The Zero slams into Fowler's Avenger at 300 miles per hour. The impact is apocalyptic. The Zero's engine, a Nakajima Sakai radial producing 1,130 horsepower, punches through the Avenger's fuselage like a cannonball through cardboard. Aviation gasoline from both aircraft ignites instantly, creating a fireball that engulfs the forward third of the flight deck. The explosion throws men 20 feet through the air, incinerates everything within a 15-foot radius, and sends a mushroom cloud of black smoke 500 feet into the tropical sky. But the ship survives. Because the Avenger, even in death, absorbed most of the impact. The Zero never reached the flight deck itself. Never penetrated to the hangar bay where 40 more aircraft are parked, fueled, and armed. Never hit the aviation fuel lines running beneath the deck plates. The TBF's structure, its weight, its sheer mass, consumed the kamikaze's kinetic energy and contained the explosion. Robert Fowler and his crew, Aviation Radioman Second Class James Mitchell and Aviation Ordnanceman First Class Paul Denton, die instantly. But 893 other men on the St. Lo survive because a Grumman TBF Avenger was tough enough to stop a suicide attack. October 25th, 1944. 0800 hours. USS Enterprise, Leyte Gulf. Admiral William Bull Halsey reads the after-action reports and sees a pattern he can no longer ignore. 23 kamikaze attacks yesterday. 14 ships hit. 6 carriers damaged, St. Lo lost. The first carrier sunk by kamikaze, though the official cause was the subsequent magazine explosion, not the initial impact. And scattered through the reports, mentioned almost casually, are multiple incidents of TBF Avengers absorbing or deflecting suicide attacks. Halsey pulls out a specific report from Santee. A Zero kamikaze struck a parked Avenger on the flight deck. The TBF's structure prevented penetration to the hangar. Damage control extinguished fires in 11 minutes. The carrier resumed flight operations within the hour. Another from Suwannee. A kamikaze crashed between 2 Avengers parked wingtip to wingtip. Both aircraft destroyed, but the wreckage absorbed most of the blast. Flight deck damage, moderate, ship operational. A third from Kalinin Bay. An Avenger pilot, Lieutenant George Carlo, was taxiing for takeoff when he saw a kamikaze diving toward the bridge. Carlo deliberately turned his aircraft into the attack path. The Zero hit the TBF's starboard wing and cartwheeled into the sea. Carlo survived with minor injuries. The carrier was undamaged. Halsey sets down the reports and looks at his operations officer, Captain William Phillips. The Avenger isn't just surviving combat damage anymore. It's being used as a defensive weapon. Yes, sir. The pilots are calling it the Iron Shield. They're parking them in positions to protect vulnerable areas. Some are even volunteering to stay aboard during attacks, specifically to serve as barriers. That's not what torpedo bombers are for. No, sir. But Grumman built them tough enough that they're more useful as damage mitigation than many dedicated defensive systems. Phillips flips through his own notes. I've got engineering's analysis. A TBF parked on the flight deck provides structural mass equivalent to 15 tons of armor plate, explosion suppression from fuel tank self-sealing systems, fire suppression from onboard extinguishers, and crew protection for anyone taking shelter behind it. Halsey considers this. The TBF Avenger was designed to deliver torpedoes and bombs against enemy ships, but its most valuable contribution might be simply existing, a flying fortress that protects the carriers that launch it, even when it's not flying. What's the Japanese assessment? He asks. Phillips pulls out an intelligence summary. SyncPack intercepts show increasing frustration. The Japanese pilots are calling the Avenger Iron Bird, or the Unkillable One. Their doctrine manuals now recommend avoiding TBFs in favor of softer targets. Some units have standing orders not to engage unless absolutely necessary. They're avoiding torpedo bombers? Yes, sir, because it takes too much ammunition to kill them, and that ammunition could be used on fighters or dive bombers that are easier to destroy. Phillips pauses. We're essentially using Avengers as decoys. They draw fire, absorb damage, and protect other aircraft by virtue of being too tough to efficiently engage. Halsey leans back in his chair. In 3 years of war, he's seen weapons evolve, tactics adapt, technology leapfrog. But this is different. This is an aircraft becoming legendary not through superior performance, but through sheer bloody-minded refusal to die. How many are we building now? He asks. Peak production hit 500 per month in August. Grumman's factory in Bethpage is running 3 shifts. General Motors is building them under license in New Jersey. Current inventory across the fleet. Approximately 2,400 aircraft. 2,400 Avengers. Each one a flying tank. Each one capable of absorbing damage that would obliterate 2 or 3 lesser aircraft. Each one flown by crews who trust the ironworks to bring them home. Keep them flying, Halsey says, and make sure every carrier commander knows what we've learned. The TBF isn't just an attack aircraft. It's a defensive asset. Use them accordingly. Yes, sir. After Phillips leaves, Halsey walks to the window and looks out at the flight deck. A dozen TBFs are parked in neat rows, their wings folded upward, their bulbous fuselages catching the morning sun. They look ungainly, inelegant, built by engineers who prioritized function over form, survival over speed. And they're winning the war. December 18th, 1944, 14:20 hours. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, Bethpage, New York. Leroy Grumman stands in the assembly hall and watches Avenger number 7546 roll off the production line. He's 60 years old, co-founder of the company that bears his name, and the man responsible for the design philosophy that made the TBF possible. Make it rugged is Grumman's personal motto. Every aircraft his company produces, the F-4F Wildcat, the F-6F Hellcat, the TBF Avenger, is overbuilt, over-engineered, heavier than competitors, but more likely to bring crews home. The Navy calls his company Iron Works. Grumman considers it the highest compliment possible. Mr. Grumman? His chief engineer, William Schwendler, approaches with a telegram. From Sinkspack, Admiral Nimitz sends his compliments. Grumman reads the message. To Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corp. From Sinkspack Re TBF Avenger. Performance assessment. Aircraft has exceeded all specifications. Survivability rate 43% higher than predecessor TBD. Crew survival rate 68% higher. Operational readiness maintained despite sustained combat damage. Request continued production at maximum rate. Well done. Nimitz, Admiral USN Grumman, reads it twice, then folds the telegram carefully and places it in his jacket pocket. Around him, the production line hums with activity. Riveters, welders, assemblers, all working in choreographed precision to build aircraft that will fly halfway around the world and face enemy fire. 68%, Schwendler says quietly. That's 68% more pilots and crew coming home alive because we added armor, redundancy, structural reinforcement. And made the aircraft heavier, Grumman replies, and slower, and less maneuverable. Every performance specification we compromised to increase survivability. But they're alive to complain about it. Grumman smiles. That's always been his answer to critics who say his aircraft are overweight, underpowered, too conservative. Dead pilots can't provide feedback. Living ones always want more speed, more range, more agility. But they want to live first. The TBF Avenger embodies that philosophy completely. It's not the fastest torpedo bomber. That honor belongs to obsolete aircraft that burned too easily. It's not the lightest. Weight saves lives. It's not even particularly elegant. Function dictates form. But it survives. And survival, in war, is the only performance metric that truly matters. How many total? Grumman asks. 7,546 aircraft delivered. Another 2,100 in various stages of production. Estimated war production, 9,800 before VJ Day. Schwendler pauses. Sir, the Avenger's going to be the most produced torpedo bomber in history, more than all Axis torpedo bombers combined. Grumman watches the latest aircraft being towed toward the test flight area. Its wings fold upward with mechanical precision. Another Grumman innovation, saving precious carrier deck space. Its propeller gleams in the winter sunlight. Somewhere inside that aluminum skin are 3 crew stations, each surrounded by armor plate, each protected by redundant systems, each designed with the assumption that someone is going to shoot at this aircraft, and the crew needs to survive. Japanese pilots mocked it at Midway, called it slow, ungainly, an easy kill. Then they tried to kill it, and failed again, and kept failing until the Avenger became the aircraft they feared most. Not because it could destroy them, but because they couldn't destroy it. The unkillable bird, the iron shield, the flying fortress that refused to fall. Keep building them, Grumman says. As long as this war continues, keep building them. Yes, sir. Leroy Grumman walks back to his office, the telegram from Nimitz still in his pocket. Outside, another Avenger starts its engine, the distinctive growl of the Wright R-2600 Cyclone, a sound that's become synonymous with American naval aviation. The sound of durability, the sound of crews coming home, the sound of victory, one impossible sortie at a time.